Thornson, Chief Technologist of Fiber Energy, Yellow Creek Nuclear Site in Tishomingo County, Mississippi.
Tishomingo County. So a little bit about our company, Flybe Energy. We're based in Huntsville, Alabama. We were incorporated in 2011. I'm the president and chief technologist of the company. I'm also the founder. My background is I studied aerospace engineering at Georgia Tech, worked for NASA. That's what got me in Huntsville. Worked there for 10 years on advanced propulsion technology. And while I was there, I learned about this just amazing molten salt reactor technology I'm going to tell you about today, and why we're so excited about it, why we think y'all might be pretty excited about it too. While I was at NASA, I was encouraged to pursue more education in nuclear and got another master's degree in nuclear engineering from the University of Tennessee, and then left government service. I worked for Teledyne Brown Engineering for a year as their chief nuclear technologist and incubated Flybe Energy a little bit while they were there. So grateful to them. I have so much to tell you about that I wish I had hours, but I'm cognizant of the fact that it's afternoon and everybody's had a very long day. So I'll try to move speedily through this, but I'll also encourage further questions and queries you might have that extend beyond this that I could then try to address. So please don't hesitate to do that. Natural gas prices have gone up in the past, but really got low and cheap for us in the 2010s. We had a little spike around the time of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but they have stabilized again. So here's uranium prices over the last 25 years, and they were really going up in the 2000s. We thought we were going to build lots and lots of reactors. Mr. Honeywell remembers this era. We called it the nuclear renaissance. And prices rose in anticipation. But then something happened. We backed off that ambitious new build. But then what really kind of happened in the 2010s was Japan shut down 50 reactors. And they stopped buying a lot of uranium, and they stopped buying a lot of separative work. And so we got a period of roughly 10 years of really affordable nuclear fuel because we were buying and everybody was selling, and it created what now appears to be kind of a bubble. What's changed now is, as you can see from 2020 onward, there was already price increases, but again, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, things really went up. Now uranium prices have more than tripled, and the price of separative work has more than quadrupled. And what this has meant, as recently as January 2020, you were able to imagine almost any kind of nuclear reactor, and its levelized cost of fuel, which is your levelized cost of electricity, just the fuel component of that, almost always beat Powder River Basin coal or Henry Hub natural gas. I mean, you almost couldn't do wrong in nuclear. You might have an expensive plant, but you were going to have cheap fuel. Okay, so here we are in the fall of 2024. Look what's happened. With the tripling of uranium prices and the quadrupling of separated work prices, now we've gone from a case where we can't lose to a case where we almost can't win. And what we're seeing along the x-axis is this is in a range of uranium enrichments all the way from natural clear up to this HALEU fuel. So almost everything we're looking at now in terms of enriched uranium, from natural uranium to enriched uranium, is coming in higher than fossil fuels. Now, we can pay more, but this is not where we want to be. We would like to be in a place where nuclear fuel should be cheap. Plants aren't cheap, but the fuel should be cheap. Now the fuel's not even cheap, and the plants certainly are not cheap. So we got a problem. We've got a real problem. And this leads to huge uncertainties as far as what should we do going forward? What's the right strategy to take? If I'm looking at a flat curve here of options and all of them look bad, where do I go from here? And this is where it is time to start thinking quite a bit differently. And I'm going to tell you about some really different options today, things that you probably haven't heard of before that I think I'm convinced are the way forward. And at the heart of these is the use of thorium as a nuclear fuel. Thorium is about 3 times more common than uranium in the world. It's found just about everywhere. I think uranium is found just about everywhere. But by using thorium, we have the potential to use nuclear fuel at almost 200 times the fuel efficiency that we currently use uranium. It is not 200%, 200 times the fuel efficiency. We also have the potential to consume existing hazardous waste from our current era of nuclear operation in the process of moving towards a new opportunity through thorium and through what I'm going to tell you about, these liquid fluoride reactors, which are a kind of molten salt reactor. Now, to break any power plant, and certainly any nuclear reactor down to its absolute guts, you've got a thing that makes something hot, you got a thing that transfers whatever got hot to some other fluid, and then you got a thing that turns that hot fluid into electricity and discharges waste heat. I mean, this is a coal plant, this is a gas plant, this is a nuclear plant, this is a solar plant. I mean, this is all kinds of things. And choosing what that coolant is makes a huge difference in the success of what you're going to undertake. There are four basic classes of coolants. There's the water, there's the gas, there's salt, and then there's metal. And just about, I can't think of too many things that don't fall in this category, but these are your four coolants. And what you'd really like is you'd like something that could achieve high temperatures while also operating at low pressures. You want high temperatures because that's going to give you efficiency. The higher you can get in temperature, the more of that energy you will convert into electricity. The lower you go, I mean, this is just thermodynamics 101. You'd also like low pressure because that means you're not going to have to build big, heavy pressure vessels. Unfortunately, what we've got with water as a primary coolant has to operate under very high pressure, and it doesn't really get very high in temperature. It's quite limited. Now, metal can go to a higher temperature, but still limited in temperature. It can go low pressure and yet high temperature. Gas can go to very high temperatures, but it has to operate also at very high pressures. Salt is the only coolant we have that's going to go to very high temperatures while still operating at low pressures, and that's the really big advantage here. There's another amazing thing about salt, and that a particular kind of salt that I'm going to tell you about, and that's its thermal capacity. This is just, it sounds complicated, but this is just how much energy the stuff will drink up. And this is your basic yardstick of how big is your power plant. If you're dealing with a coolant that just can't suck up very much energy, you're going to have a lot of it, lots and lots of it. And unfortunately, that's where we are with gas. Gas takes a lot of material to get that energy up. Water's great on this. Water can drink up lots of energy per unit volume. This salt that I'm talking about, Flibe salt, this can drink even more. This is where our company gets its funny name, Flibe. So what is Flibe? This is pretty darn close. This is Flynet. Here's a picture of Flibe. Flibe is lithium fluoride and beryllium fluoride, two fluoride salts put together in a 2-to-1 ratio. The fancy name for this stuff is dilithium tetrafluorobarylate. So you could make the argument those are actually dilithium crystals there on the left, and you would not be incorrect. I am named Kurt too, so it gets worse, you know. But that's what melted Flibe looks like right there on the right. When you melt it, it's clear as water. That Flibe happens to have a little bit of dissolved nuclear fuel in it, a little bit of uranium that gives it just a little bit of a bluish-greenish cast to it there. So chemists at Oak Ridge National Laboratory a million years ago mercifully renamed this complicated atomic symbol into a word that we can say, Flibe. So that's where we get this funny name from. So they actually went and fabricated a reactor at Oak Ridge made out of Flibe fuel, using graphite as a moderator, using a structural alloy, and this is a picture of it right here in the middle. It was called the Molten Salt Reactor Experiment, and it ran successfully for 4 years, and they operated this reactor in a state of chemical equilibrium. And here's why I think elected officials should be really, really excited about that, because when you run a reactor in a state of chemical equilibrium, it means there's nothing to let go. There's nothing to go wrong. There's no reaction to happen. There's no pressure release. There's nothing naughty to take place. And that, as an engineer, I can tell you, is just the way you want to run things. You want the marble to be at the bottom of the bowl. You know, you don't want some kind of excursion. So we figured out how to do this back in the 60s. We still don't run reactors today in chemical equilibrium. Fortunately, our water-cooled reactors today do not operate this way. We can't operate them this way, but they figured out how to do it way back when. By operating with liquid fuel, you have the potential to do something just amazing that we can't do with solid fuel, and that is if everything goes wrong, if everybody gets up and walks away, if the rapture happens and carries away the whole town, the reactor is kept operating by circulating that Flibe salt through the core, which is kind of here represented as that yellow fluid. And just like you might plug a bathtub, we keep the reactor plugged at the bottom with a plug of frozen salt. And then we actively keep that going. We use a fan or some kind of cooling system. So the idea is if you lose all that, then that plug's going to melt and that fuel is just going to drain out into another tank, a drain tank we call it, where it will just be passively cooled indefinitely there. So this is the only reactor design where the fuel can move from the reactor core into an emergency position all by itself without any intervention. As long as gravity's around, this is going to happen. And even in a case of severe reactor damage, this is still going to take place. So very, very safe. I'd love to tell you I invented all this stuff, gentlemen, but this was all invented long before I was even born. I will tell you I've been pretty instrumental in waking people up about it, though, and helping them realize again that this is a great idea. Within the reactor, we want to orient it. It was earlier talked about the fast neutron damage on the reactor vessel. That's true, but there are ways to go and orient these FLIBE salts so as to make sure that you're putting absorptive material between the busy part of the reactor, the active core, and the reactor vessel, and this is going to protect the reactor vessel for a long time from neutron damage. This is an artist's image of what we imagine our reactor facility to look like, and within that building would be 4 250 megawatt electric units. So altogether, that would be about a gigawatt of generation capacity. And you can see these are very, very compact designs. In fact, there's still quite a bit of room even in that building in this scenario. Key to the success of this is the use of thorium as a fuel. And I have a video that I'd like to play for you here. So I was mentioning we've got these molten salt reactor concepts, and we want to run them on thorium as a nuclear fuel. I mentioned just a moment ago that they're going to have two fluids, the fuel salt, the FLIBE salt, and also that protective blanket salt that wraps around it and shields the reactor vessel from neutrons. Both of these work together in order to realize the energy possibility of thorium. And liquid fuel is contrasted with the solid nuclear fuel we use today. We think that if we can use this thorium properly in this reactor, we can create essentially an endless supply of new fuel. Let me walk you through how this works. We call it the thorium fuel cycle. At the moment of fission, a neutron, at least one neutron is released that is going to go and it's going to be absorbed in an atom of thorium. And it's going to set off a process of transformation where that thorium then decays to an atom of protactinium and later decays to an atom of uranium. And that uranium is a special material that can sustain a nuclear reaction, and thus it can continue fissioning and through this process continue the generation of electricity, feeding the reactor thorium and generating more and more fission as that thorium is transformed into new nuclear fuel. So this is the overall idea of how it works. To understand this more closely, let me zoom in a little bit on this uranium. What makes uranium uranium is that it has 92 protons. In this case, it has 141 neutrons, and that gives us an atomic mass of 233. There are two different isotopes of uranium that have a very special property. They are called fissile isotopes. That means they can undergo nuclear fission. One of those is natural, and one of those we can create. Uranium is surrounded by electrons, and the four outermost electrons of uranium can be shared with other atoms. In this case, sharing them with 4 atoms of fluorine. We would call this material uranium tetrafluoride. Tetra means 4, and so we would have 4 fluoride ions bound to this uranium atom. Fluoride is a compound that sounds weird, but you probably brushed your teeth this morning with an analogous compound called sodium fluoride. So not that weird. But when uranium is struck by a slowed down neutron, it sets up a process of change where it can fission and release 2 or 3 more neutrons and an enormous amount of energy, as well as 2 fission products from that fission reaction. So we're going to follow one of those neutrons. It was asked earlier about fast neutrons and slow neutrons. So when a neutron is first born from fission, man, it's really cooking. It's going fast. And it's probably not going to cause another nuclear reaction until we slow it down. We call that slowing down process moderation, and we do this in graphite. And what happens is that neutron just sort of bangs around in there and loses energy and slows down. Once it's slowed down, much more likely to cause another fission reaction, releasing those neutrons. So we need one of those neutrons to find another fissile atom of uranium, keep the process going. But let's follow the other neutron and see what we want it to do. We want it to go and find an atom of thorium. Now, thorium, it's not nuclear fuel yet. It's going to be turned into nuclear fuel. But natural thorium consists of 90 protons and 142 neutrons, giving it an atomic mass of 232. That's why we call it thorium-232. But when it absorbs that neutron, now instead of having 142 neutrons, it has 143, and it has an atomic mass of 233. So it's another isotope of thorium. This isotope of thorium, though, only lasts about 30 minutes before one of those neutrons decays into a proton and emits an electron, and we call that process beta decay. And once that takes place, instead of having 90 protons, it has 91, and it loses one of those neutrons, still has the same atomic mass, and it's not thorium anymore. It's a new element called protactinium, in this case protactinium-233. And once it's protactinium, it's chemically distinct from the thorium that's in the salt. What that means is we could actually go and extract it from the salt. We really have an incentive to do it because it's going to take about a month for that protactinium to decay into the form of uranium we want, and we really don't want it to absorb any more neutrons during that month. So we'd like to get it sort of out of that swarm of neutrons in the reactor, and we're going to do this by using a simple electrolytic cell. It's not like a battery. We put a very modest voltage on a circuit with an electrode and another electrode, and we can drive metallic thorium off that electrode into the salt while driving that protactinium into the other liquid electrode. And through this process, we can refuel the reactor constantly while transferring that protactinium to a fuel salt carrier. We're going to let it sit in storage for a couple of months. We're going to let all of that protactinium decay away into uranium. All those little dudes are going to flip. And then we're ready to go and put it back into the reactor and refuel the reactor. And by so doing, this process, we can keep that new fuel we've made from thorium in the reactor and keep the thorium fuel cycle going essentially indefinitely. This is going to make a big difference in our ability to use nuclear fuels. I said that 200 times improvement, but uranium-233 is really the key to that. And we don't have hardly any of this stuff. We really need a lot more of this. So now I get to the sort of the Mississippi fun part. We needed a site to look into building our reactors, both big and small. And when I was working at NASA, I was on assignment at one point to the Army Space and Missile Defense Command, and we were doing a satellite experiment out at the Yellow Creek site in Tishomingo County. And I one day drove down the road and I found a nuclear reactor. And I was just amazed to find out, once upon a time, TVA was building a pair of big nuclear reactors out in Tishomingo County. And these guys were going to generate 2,800 megawatts of electrical power. And to put that in perspective, if this site had been built out, this would have been the fourth most powerful nuclear site in the entire United States today. So this would have been a very big deal. A lot of work was done. Billions and billions of dollars were put into this site. But along with many other TVA reactors, it was canceled in the early 1980s. Ironically, the same design was actually built out in Arizona as the Palo Verde plant. So these reactors in Arizona are copies of the ones that were going to be built at Yellow Creek. And as we earlier talked about, that same design was passed on to the Koreans and later built in Abu Dhabi as the Baraka reactor. So there's a straight line that goes right back to Mississippi from Abu Dhabi, interestingly. This is what the site looks like this was about 2017. There's the turbine building for Unit 1, and there's the remnants of Reactor 1, kind of there at the lower part of the screen, remnants of the cooling tower. NASA took the site over in the late 1980s and was going to build solid rocket boosters there. But then that was canceled in the early 1990s. And so the folks in Iuka when we went there and we said, we'd like to build a nuclear reactor here, they said, it's about time. They said, we've been waiting a long time for somebody to finish what got started here a long time ago. And we've heard people say, we want to do this and we want to do that. We're about ready for something to happen. So, we're sensitive to the desires of the community there, and I know they want to see things go quickly, but we went out there and we basically talked with the Board of Supervisors and said, would you let us lease the site? Would you let us lease the nuclear relevant portions of the site? And after some negotiating, they did. So we've had the site under lease now for about 5 years, and we've put probably $250,000 into site improvements there. And we'd welcome any of you to come there and see what we've done and see what we'd like to do. We think this is one of the very best nuclear sites in the United States, to say nothing just to the state itself. I've examined lots and lots of nuclear sites, and I really think Yellow Creek has an awful lot going for it. Just to put Yellow Creek kind of in perspective, the river connects the TVA sites to one another, and you see that Yellow Creek is there, right there in the very uppermost corner of the state of Mississippi, but still very much in Mississippi. Sometimes people forget that one of Mississippi's borders actually is the Tennessee River, so that little tiny piece. But this is a really amazing site because the other thing that happens right there is that's where the Tennessee-Tombigbee Waterway forks off of the Tennessee River, giving the Tennessee River kind of a unique backdoor to the Gulf of Mexico through Mobile. Y'all probably remember a few years ago when the bridge in Memphis, there was crack in it, and they were stopping traffic on the river in both ways. And that was the only way to get up the Mississippi, was to go up the Tenn-Tom and to reconnect through the Ohio. So that was a fascinating moment of a moment when we had to use the back door to our entire inland waterway network through that location there in Tishomingo County. We see an obvious riverine advantage there to using the Yellow Creek site, not only to making power there, but also to talking about, could this be a very good manufacturing site? Could this be a place where we produce reactors that could be mobile, that could be put onto ships, put onto barges? Some of our investors in our company are from the commercial shipping industry. They are intensely interested in a carbon-free alternative to power shipping. And most of the other options simply don't work for them. So we see this site as not only a power generation site, but potentially a production site, a manufacturing site for really advanced technology. And we're very, very excited about it. But obviously, there's a long way to go. Let me talk a little bit about your existing site, pretty far away from that corner of the state, where you have the single largest nuclear power plant in the entire country. And it's been operating for about 40 years, providing reliable energy, but it's also accumulated a non-trivial amount of spent nuclear fuel during that time, the vast majority of which is material that we could recycle, but right now is considered a waste and does not have a disposition option. We think that this molten salt technology is the way forward because instead of fabricating these very, very elaborate, I'm a mechanical engineer, I think this is a beautiful thing to look at a fuel assembly, but when you're a chemical engineer and you go, I got to go chop it up now and dissolve it. Then you're like, oh, darn, like destroying a Swiss watch. But when we make nuclear fuel today, we actually take our oxide fuel and we go through a fluoride stage. We have to in order to enrich nuclear fuel. We have to turn uranium dioxide into uranium hexafluoride in order to enrich it. So it's not weird to talk about fluoride compounds of uranium. In fact, every speck of uranium we use in today's nuclear reactors has been fluoride at some point in order to be prepared to be nuclear fuel. What we're talking about, I think, is actually more normal, which is to say, what if we got it into fluoride form and then used it as a fluoride form? And this is what we're proposing to do with this spent nuclear fuel, is to go and fluorinate it, to turn it from ceramic material, from solid pellets, into a liquid molten salt, a fluoride, and then to be able to use some of those same technologies that I showed you in the video, those electric separations, to get the good stuff out and to put the bad stuff kind of into a form where it's ready to be disposed. And by doing that, you can reduce the volume of the stuff you need to throw away by about a factor of 30. I mean, it's a humongous improvement, and you can recycle over 90% of what's there because most of it is very, very useful material. So this is exciting. This is something that we want to use in order to help start our reactors. Could we build a reactor facility potentially at Yellow Creek that could go and take spent fuel, potentially from Grand Gulf, and turn it into new nuclear fuel, and to then make electricity there, generating electricity not only for the needs of northern Mississippi, but perhaps for southern Tennessee as well, maybe even reaching over to Memphis. I know I'm probably getting into TVA's territory here, Mr. Honeywell, but this is showing where our coal plants are, and it's almost a map of our river network. You see there's just an intense amount of coal that has been along the Ohio River and the Mississippi River, and many of these plants have now been shut down, and there is a need to repower our country after having these coal plants be shut down. Why were they on the river? Well, they were on the river because you could get coal there very inexpensively by barge. You can't do this with natural gas, by the way. This is pretty neat that you can do it with a barge. So you can move a lot of material very inexpensively on this river network. You can also take advantage of the river for cooling the plants. So it's no surprise that we found these coal plants on the river. But what if we could build mobile molten salt reactors, perhaps on a barge, that could go to these sites and produce that same kind of power and repower these coal sites? What if we could see a repowering not only along the Tennessee River, but along the Tennessee-Tombigbee Waterway, along the Mississippi, along many of these sites? This is a big stretch vision we have, but again, it's congruent with a number of our investors' desires to see us getting into mobile power solutions, solutions for commercial shipping, solutions for offshore oil platforms, which we've recently been turned on to as a great big need for reliable power. And so we see a very, very exciting future, and we think that this site in Mississippi is an extremely logical place to go and make this happen. So in conclusion, we believe this technology is going to be the dominant energy source by the end of the 21st century, that we are going to be running the world on thorium. And this may be one of the most important economic and technological developments of this century. And if we can do this, it's going to go a lot further beyond that. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Very thorough explanation. I appreciate it. Welcome to Mississippi.
Thank you.
You said y'all have had it leased for 5 years?
Yeah. We've had the site under lease for 5 years.
Mr. McNatt, being from Tishomingo County, I know I'm close enough, and so everybody's always, what's going into Yellow Creek? What's going into Yellow Creek? So it would be nice to kind of come full circle and have a nuclear facility there.
I think so too.
Commissioners, questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. I'm excited to be in this moment right now to learn this. I'm going to ask our staff if we can plan a tour with Representative Bubba Carpenter up there in Tishomingo County and just to take a look at it to get a deeper understanding, to lift everything you said off paper and put it in so we can understand a little bit.
Yeah, I've met with Bubba. He's been out to our site before.
He's a good friend of mine.
I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah,
What I've learned in Tishomingo County is everybody knows everything.
Yeah.
I'll do something out at the site, and by the time I get to the Walmart, they'll be like, "So I heard you're out there today." I'm like, "Oh my gosh."
Commissioner Stamps and I both served with Bubba in the legislature, so we know Bubba well.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Thanks a lot for your presentation. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Carr?
There's no environmental issues?
No,
Zero.
I can't think of any.
So the NRC wouldn't be involved in this?
Oh, the NRC is always involved.
Okay, gotcha.
For licensing of nuclear reactors. But just to give you a little bit of background on how I started with this, when I was at NASA, we were trying to imagine how we would power a Mars base or a moon base. And this is back when I thought I was going to get to go, and I thought, what could we do? What kind of nuclear reactor could we build that was so safe that not only would you live on top of it, you'd have to live on top of it. And if it turned off, you were going to die within hours. So it wasn't like you're going to turn it off and run the other way. If it turns off, you're going to die. And I couldn't think of any nuclear technology that I kind of felt rose to that level until I learned about this molten salt reactor technology. And then I thought, this is a reactor I'd live on top of. I would be that confident in its ability to take care of me.
So how old is this technology again?
This technology was originally invented in the 1950s and it was demonstrated in the 1960s. Then it got canceled. And I spent 10 years trying to uncover why. And I wrote up my master's thesis for the University of Tennessee around this issue. And I can give you a 10-hour answer, or I can give you the 5-second answer.
On to 5 seconds.
All right, we'll do the 5-second answer. The 5-second answer is it really wasn't compatible with our nuclear weapons ambitions and our nuclear weapons industry, and so it got shelved.
How small can you go?
We think that we could probably build a reactor as small as 10 megawatts. I mean, you can build it as small as you want. It's just not going to get any physically smaller. You can build a 1-watt reactor if you want, but it's still going to be pretty big. But in terms of at what size does it stop getting any physically smaller? Probably about 10 or 5 megawatts, that size. But we would love to have you come to Yellow Creek. We would love for that. And let's talk and show you what's there and what we think could be.
Definitely worth piloting.
Yeah.
It's
Just
exciting.
for education purposes with our institutions, we can take some of our university systems and do a test just to pilot it, not adopt it, but just pilot it. And that's
Absolutely.
definitely something that should be funded.
Mississippi doesn't have a university research reactor anywhere, and I've thought for a long time that this would make an excellent site for, Ole Miss to be able to have that kind of capability.
And you're proving I'm a genius. It's a late day joke, y'all. Y'all can laugh by now, right?
So send us some material and he'll read it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
And Ed, thank you for your presentation. Like Commissioner Stamp said, we'd love to come up and see what you're doing and hear more. And we're serious. Any kind of papers or any
Can I get that through Mr. McNatt? Would that be
yeah,
right
if you
with
will, and
Okay.
he'll distribute it to all three of us. And yeah, anything like that, would love to learn more and visit the site.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Well, that was our last presenter for the day. I don't know about everybody else, but that was very enlightening. We learned a lot today, and we had a lot of new technology, like the last one, and a lot of old technology. The good part of it is that finally, I think our country is on the right path, and we want to get Mississippi on that path.